Ryan Carter thought moving to the countryside would free him from the absurd rules of HOA-controlled neighborhoods. No more nosy neighbors, no more baseless fines, no one to meddle in how he lived on his own land. Just peace, wide open space, and a private dirt road leading straight to his house. But he was wrong. Linda Simmons, the HOA president of this area, showed up at his doorstep just one day after he moved in. No friendly hello, no welcoming smile, just a clipboard full of papers and a judgmental stare. This road is for community residents. You can't just drive on it whenever you please. Ryan frowned, his hand still on his truck door. I live here. This is my road. This land is completely mine. Linda pursed her lips, snapping her clipboard. All roads in this area are under HOA jurisdiction. You need to submit a request for usage rights, just like everyone else. Ryan laughed. No way. This road has been here since the previous owner, and I bought it along with the house. The HOA has no authority over it. Linda took a deep breath, her face betraying her irritation. If you don't follow the rules, we'll have to take other measures. Ryan didn't care. He slammed his truck door and left Linda standing there. But the next morning, he stepped outside and saw sharp spike strips embedded right in his driveway. The HOA had declared war. Linda Simmons wasn't just an ordinary HOA president. She was power-obsessed, convinced she controlled everything in this neighborhood. From house paint colors to fence heights to the number of plants in your garden, Linda demanded everything follow the rules she set. When Ryan Carter refused to comply, Linda was far from pleased. She started with warning letters, a bright red notice taped to Ryan's front door. Your driveway does not meet community standards. Submit a usage request or face consequences. Ryan tossed it in the trash. The next day, a second warning arrived, this time with a ridiculous fine. Unauthorized road usage violation, $250, due in 7 days. Ryan didn't pay, and that's when Linda took real action. The following morning, he found a row of sharp steel spike strips planted right in the middle of his driveway. These weren't flimsy spikes. They were the kind police use to stop high-speed chases. Ryan stormed over to Linda's house and pounded on the door. She opened it, arms crossed, eyes defiant. I warned you. Rules are rules. But she wasn't done yet. As night fell, Linda called a towing company the HOA had on contract. When Ryan woke up the next morning, his truck was gone. Linda thought she'd won, but she'd picked the wrong person to mess with. Ryan wasn't the type to sit back and take it, and Linda Simmons wasn't the only one with power in this neighborhood. The moment he noticed his truck was missing, Ryan didn't call the HOA or Linda. He made one call, to Jake Turner, his personal lawyer. Jake, I've got a big problem. The HOA put spike strips on my driveway and towed my truck with no legal basis. On the other end, Jake paused for a few seconds. They did what? Ryan, you're saying the HOA installed spike strips on private property and towed your truck without a legal order? Exactly, Jake chuckled. They just dug their own grave. Within an hour, a legal letter was sent straight to Linda and the HOA, listing the potential charges. Property damage. The HOA had no right to alter or install devices on an individual's driveway. Public endangerment. Spike strips could cause serious accidents, especially if emergency vehicles needed to reach Ryan's house. Vehicle theft. Towing Ryan's truck without official notice was illegal. And if Linda didn't remove the spike strips immediately, the HOA would face a lawsuit worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But Linda wasn't the type to back down easily. When Ryan got home, he found her standing in front of his driveway, arms crossed, waiting with a smug look. She thought the law couldn't touch her. She was dead wrong. When Linda thought she could get away with it, Deputy Harris stepped in to prove otherwise. The next morning, Ryan didn't waste time escalating things. Armed with Jake Turner's legal letter and security camera footage, he called the county sheriff's office. 30 minutes later, Deputy Harris, a seasoned officer skilled in civil disputes, arrived at Ryan's driveway. Mr. Carter, I hear you've got a serious issue with the HOA. Ryan handed his phone to Harris, playing the video. Linda directing workers to install spike strips in front of the driveway. Linda standing with arms crossed, smiling as Ryan discovered them. A tow truck arriving in the dead of night, taking Ryan's truck without a legal order. Deputy Harris nodded slowly. He didn't say much, but Ryan noticed the officer's hand tighten on his gun belt. "All right, let's go talk to her." Harris and Ryan walked to Linda's house. She was already at the door, looking ready for a fight. "Oh, good morning, officer. I suppose Ryan's gone crying to the police?" Linda smirked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Harris didn't smile. He pulled out a stack of documents, the legal letter from Jake. "Ms. Simmons, you're facing serious charges: property damage, public endangerment, and vehicle theft. I need you to remove the spike strips immediately and show me proof of where you towed Mr. Carter's truck." Linda's composure cracked. "Vehicle theft? Are you kidding? This was HOA rule enforcement." Harris shook his head, unflinching. "Wrong. The HOA has no authority to seize personal vehicles. What you did is against the law." Linda stammered, but with neighbors watching and a cop staring her down, she was powerless. "Ms. Simmons, you're under arrest for theft of a vehicle." The sound of handcuffs clicking rang out. Linda screamed in protest, but Harris had already secured her hands behind her back. As Harris led Linda to the patrol car, neighbors looked on. Some clapped, some shook their heads. Ryan just crossed his arms, giving Linda a knowing smile. "I warned you, Linda." Linda might have thought she ruled the neighborhood like a queen, but she forgot one thing. The people's discontent would erupt once they found someone brave enough to stand up, and that someone was Tom Reynolds. Tom, a veteran who'd lived there for over 25 years, longer than anyone on the HOA board, had watched the HOA morph from a community aid group into a tool for Linda and her cronies to manipulate and profit. The day Linda was cuffed by Deputy Harris, neighbors gathered in record numbers. Some whispered, some filmed discreetly, but no one spoke loudly, until Tom stepped forward. "I think it's time everyone knew the truth." His voice was clear, steady, and commanding. Tom pointed at Linda being shoved into the police car. "Has she ever actually helped any of us? Or just found ways to squeeze money out of us and make our lives harder?" He held up a stack of HOA letters he'd collected over the years. A $500 fine for flying the American flag too long on its pole. An order to remove a bench from his porch because it didn't meet neighborhood standards. A warning against hosting a BBQ with neighbors because it affected common space. This is what Linda's HOA did to me, and I'm not the only one. The crowd buzzed, a few heads nodding. A woman stood up. "They threatened me too. I got fined $300 for planting daisies out front. They said they weren't standard plants." Another man raised his hand. "They forced me to take down my son's slide. Said it didn't fit the neighborhood look." The crowd exploded. One by one, residents stood, calling out the ridiculous actions Linda and her crew had enforced for years. They realized they weren't alone in this fight. Tom turned to Ryan, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're not the first to get screwed by the HOA, but you're the first to fight back and win. You've shown us we don't have to bow to them." And right then, the revolt against the HOA officially began. Mike Dalton wasn't a man of honor. He didn't care about right or wrong. He cared about cash. So when Linda called with a job, Mike didn't hesitate. "There's a vehicle breaking HOA rules. I want you to tow it tonight," Linda ordered. Mike didn't ask why. He just asked, "How much do you want me to charge?" $500 towing fee, $150 per day for storage," Linda replied. Mike smirked. He'd done this dozens of times before, easy money, but he didn't realize he was stepping into something much bigger this time. When Ryan and Deputy Harris showed up at Mike's impound lot, he wasn't fazed. "What's the problem, officer?" Mike asked, faking politeness. Deputy Harris stepped up to the gate, eyes icy. "That black truck was towed illegally. The owner has full documentation proving it's on private property, not under HOA control. I suggest you release it now." Mike shrugged, acting casual. "Might have been a mix-up. But to get the truck, you've got to pay the fees." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "Fees? This is theft." Mike stayed stubborn, holding up an invoice. "The truck's been here overnight. That's impound policy. Then Jake Turner, the lawyer, stepped forward. He gave a thin smile, holding up a folder of papers. Do you know what happens when a business gets tied up in theft? I was just following the HOA's orders, Mike argued. Wrong. You towed a vehicle from private property without a legal order. That makes you an accomplice. If you don't want to be sued, investigated, and maybe lose this lot, I suggest you open the gate and hand over the truck now. Mike swallowed hard. He glanced at Ryan, then Harris, then Jake. No one was backing him up. He'd misjudged the situation. Finally, he sighed and waved to his worker to open the gate. Ryan's truck was released, no charge. But as Ryan drove off, Deputy Harris turned to Mike with a cold smile. One more thing. I'll be reporting this to the city council. Don't be shocked if your business license hits a snag. Mike went pale. He thought he was just doing a job, but he'd bet on the wrong side. And the cost of greed wouldn't be cheap. When Linda was arrested, the neighborhood was thrown into chaos. Everyone knew the HOA had gone too far. But what now? Who'd take over? Would the HOA keep going or get shut down completely? 2 days after the arrest, an emergency meeting was called, not by Linda, but by residents who wanted to take back their neighborhood. In the tense meeting hall, Samuel Green stood up. A longtime resident, he was a quiet man with a steady gaze that radiated resolve. Samuel had been one of the few to challenge Linda when she was in charge, but he also believed the HOA wasn't inherently bad. It had just been twisted into a weapon by power-hungry people like her. We can't let the HOA keep running like it has, Samuel said, his voice warm yet firm. But we can't let this neighborhood fall apart either. We need a new HOA, one that sticks to its original purpose, protecting residents' interests, not controlling them. The room went quiet. Someone spoke up. So what's your plan, Samuel? We've had enough suffering. Samuel nodded, like he'd been expecting the question. First, all the absurd rules Linda and her group made up are gone, effective immediately. No more vague fines, no more weird regulations about paint colors, fence heights, or mailbox styles. That stuff doesn't build a community. Another voice asked, but how do we stop another Linda from coming back? Samuel looked right at the crowd. We'll overhaul how the HOA works. No more secret meetings, no more sneaky rules slipped in without our say. Every big decision will be public and put to a democratic vote. No one argued. It was exactly what they'd been waiting for. After hours of discussion, the vote happened. Every single resident, 100%, agreed to make Samuel the new HOA president. Linda and her allies were fully kicked off the board. It wasn't just a win for Ryan, it was a win for the whole neighborhood. The HOA wouldn't be a tool of oppression anymore. It'd go back to being a group that actually served the community. At first, most folks in the neighborhood didn't dare speak out about Linda's actions. They were used to getting hit with silly fines and forced to follow odd HOA rules, but everyone was scared they'd be the next target if they pushed back. Ryan was just the latest to get crushed by Linda, but this time she'd gone too far. Putting spike strips on his driveway, stealing his truck in the middle of the night. That wasn't HOA business. It was a crime. The anger started spreading. Tom Reynolds was the first to stand up, but then others followed, one by one. A middle-aged woman held up an old fine letter at the emergency meeting. I got slapped with a $500 fine once for not mowing my lawn to the HOA standard. But who decided that standard? Linda and her crew. A man stepped forward. She made me take down my daughter's swing set because it ruined the common look. Sound familiar? One after another, people shared their stories. Fine letters, shady HOA fees, the tricks Linda used to keep everyone in line. All of it came out. When the vote finally happened, the outcome was crystal clear. 100% agreed to strip Linda of her power. The HOA wouldn't be run by a power-hungry tyrant anymore. Hours later, Linda was cuffed by the police in front of everyone, and for the first time in years, the residents felt like they'd taken their voices back. I've lived here long enough to know power in the wrong hands can turn into a dangerous weapon. Linda wasn't the first HOA to abuse her role, and sadly, she won't be the last. But this time, she made a huge mistake. She thought no one would dare stand up to her. Ryan didn't just fight for himself. He fought for all of us who'd suffered under abusive HOAs, who thought we had no choice but to take it. This story proves something big. Homeowners associations aren't the law. They can't do whatever they want. When they cross the line, we have the right and the duty to push back. Justice only comes when someone's brave enough to fight. If Ryan hadn't spoken up, if Jake hadn't gathered evidence, if Deputy Harris hadn't enforced the law, Linda might still be running the show. Justice doesn't always show up on its own. Sometimes we've got to grab it ourselves. The community's strength is the ultimate weapon. Ryan's neighbors were scared at first, but when they united, Linda couldn't stand against them. If we let HOAs bully us, we're next in line. But if we stand together, no HOA can push us around. Have you ever dealt with an HOA like Linda? Don't stay quiet. If this story fires you up, comment with the number 1, share your experience, and subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss the next epic HOA showdown.